Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast with Benji Naesen. This is the recap now of the Gent-Wevelgem women's race. We got to see a good portion of it. Well, pretty much all of the main action, which you couldn't say for the men's race, at least the last 40 kilometres, and a similar profile for the last 40 Ks. As with the men's race, I'm barred from going through the parcours. So why don't you run us through it, Benji?
Okay, so basically the differences lie mostly in the bergs and the length of the overall race, of course. In the women's race, we've got 143.5 kilometers being ridden, of which the first 61-ish are flat, and then we start the first section of hills. We start with the Scherpenberg, Videniaberg, Baneberg, Monteberg, and Kemmelberg. So that same couple of climbs we have in the men's race following each other. And then we go towards those black streets, all three of them, and eventually this leads towards a last time the Kemmelberg and the Monteberg. So we don't have 10 to 13 or 14, whatever it is in the men's race. Bergs, we have roughly, I'd say 7, if I can count correctly, yes. And then basically it's a good 31-ish kilometers from the last stop of the Kemmelberg to the finish line, which is a similar trajectory of the men's race. So same story with the fire, have to do a kilometer and a half extra, which led to a bit of confusion when it comes to the ticker at the left top of the race. But in the end, we all roughly figured out how the race was going. But did we see anything similar to the men's race in this race? Did we see, for example, echelons opening up, or did the race take a long time to really open up?
Yeah, I think that last ascent of the Kemmelberg had everyone really concerned, and on the Plugstraat, there's nothing happened. Um, yeah, nothing really happened. It was a large group of like 60 plus. Even on the Monteberg before the Kemmelberg, nothing happened. And it was only when Elisa Longo Borghini, with 37 Ks to go, attacked on the climb of the Kemmelberg, and she's in a purple jersey as the leader of the women's world tour rankings. So that's really annoying because she's actually normally usually easy to pick out in the Italian national champs jerseys. So just another purple jersey. Love it. And she got joined by a pretty select group. Kopecky, Voss, Cavalli, Van Dijk, Peters, Nui Adoma over the top of the Kemmelberg. And I thought, ooh, when usually in the women's races, when a group this strong with the favourites goes, it's pretty hard to bring them back because no one will chase from behind, but someone chased. I think SD Works wouldn't have been too happy with that that group. They only had about 12 seconds gap at most, and they had a group of 13 or so chasing them, and they weren't working well together. Voss wasn't working. She sat on and then attacked on a short rise. Then she got closed down. Then they all looked at each other. And so eventually the groups came back together, a group of 30. And then it was Anna Henderson attacking Benji on Jumbo Visma. They had multiple riders in the group. They had Voss, who they'd back in a quick finish. And I guess they were getting on the offensive against SE Works, Canyon SRAM, and Live Racing. What was the gap Anna Henderson got? It was pretty healthy at one point.
I think it went over 20 seconds at a certain point, and
Yeah.
I don't know how the maximum time she had, but eventually it started faltering again, and the gap started closing down again once the group behind started working a tiny bit together. Because obviously, if one person has the attack and going, then the others are not going to be super happy about that. And this is also just after well, you said it, after the Camelback, which means that all the people that dropped on the Camelback that are behind, perhaps decent sprinters, but couldn't follow the front group on the cobble section, they try and come back, and groups form in the back, and groups come together, and those groups that come together, they find cooperation, and they come back together with the second group, and that second group becomes larger, and then the second group can easily, well, relatively easily, catch back on to a rider like Anna Henderson at the front. But I think the race basically came back together afterwards, and it was not until a moment where I thought, this is pretty relaxed, and then suddenly, boom, everybody started panicking because I think it was
Trek
it Live
Segafredo tried to
Racing?
split
No,
it.
yeah, yeah, correct. Trek
So
Segafredo.
that gap to Henderson was a bit of a false. Yeah, like they were clearly letting her dangle at 20, 25 seconds, and then Trek assembled the troops at the front with Van Dijk, Ruth Winder, Longa Borghini, Dijkman, and they started trying to split it again. They put it in the gutter and they were rotating those four riders within each other, and they did, in fact, split the group and, yeah, put the peloton behind them. They were joined by Peters and Majerus from SD Works, Guazzini, Balsamo. She's quick, Balsamo, and they caught back up to Anna Henderson. But then I think Diagnan, she let the wheel go, or Elisa Longoborghini attacked with the other Italian, Soraya Paladin, for Live Racing. And because I always get confused between Live Racing and Canyon Shram, but particularly because Canyon Shram used to ride Lives. But yeah, I thought Paladin would have been sitting on Longoborghini pretty much the whole time, but she was working with her on and off to the best of her legs would allow her to. 15 Ks to go. Longoborghini has a 25-second advantage over the bunch with Paladin there. Now she's got Diagnan, who was very quick in the finishes last year, but maybe not against sprinters of the caliber of Voss. She beat Voss in a small bunch sprint, but then there's Kopecky here too. It means Van Dijk can sit in. It means SD Works have to burn riders. I'm not sure where Jolien Dor was at this point. Obviously, we don't have Van der Breggen and Van Vleuten here. It's more of a contenders with sprinters like Balsamo, Bastianelli, Sarah Roy, Emma Norsgaard. Also, different jersey for Norsgaard, leader of the U23. Not no Danish national champs jersey. Don't know about that either. So it was a good move for Trek. It meant they could sit in. It meant that all the other teams, pretty much the purples, had to chase. And particularly with Doma and Cromwell, they were the ones chasing the hardest, even though they didn't really have a sprinter. I don't think Doma was their leader. So that was a bit curious to me. I guess maybe if they didn't chase, no one else was going to bring it back. And can you describe what happened with the kilometer banners? Because I got confused with the graphics. It said it was 3Ks to go. I measured a 12-second gap on the road, but then there was this motorway. Benji, can you tell me how actually far was there to go at that motorway overpass?
Yeah, so the motorway overpass is just before they go on to the original parkour again. We said before
Okay.
already in the men's podcast that there is a 3.5 kilometer section from the moment that they reach the original parkour to the finish line. The motor section is just before that. So there was roughly 4 to 3.5 kilometers to go, while the original thing on the left up was saying 1.9 kilometers because that's the original length that was still left if the race was ridden on the normal parkour. They just didn't seem to have updated it correctly. So very chaotic because the commentators were like, "Oh my god, how far is it?" And it all really became non-confusing the moment that we hit the 3 kilometer banner on the original parkour again. Then we knew, yes, this is 3 kilometers to the line. We still had a gap, and it was counted at 24 seconds at a certain point. Like I hand counted it to 16 seconds, so it wasn't really correct what was showing when it comes to seconds either. So we have to kind of guess. But I think between like 2 kilometers to go and 1 kilometer to go, the gap between the peloton and the two riders at the front, Paladin and Elisa Longoborghini, it wasn't really coming too much closer because you've got the situation where the teams that have sprinters, they're trying to move themselves to the front, and it was not until the winner of E3, no, it wasn't E3, it was the Redux, my bad. There's no E3 for women. The winner for the Redux, Grace Brown, came to the front to set up Sarah Roy, that
Yeah.
we had someone actually chasing, and really powerful move by Grace Brown, moving the team forward. And, well, that led in the sprint, and I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, so I think the plan for Trek was a good one, but they got very unlucky because the way I saw it was attack with Elisa Longa-Borghini, she could win. If she gets brought back, you can attack with Ellen van Dijk, force other teams to chase, and hopefully Diagnan, who'd been marking a lot of moves, can then contest a messy, reduced sprint. The problem was Elisa Longa-Borghini got caught just at the wrong time. 500 meters to go to the finish, so she's obviously not winning, but it's also too late for any counterattacks because the sprinters, trains, and teams are pretty much assembled, and that's what we saw on the right. Well, there was a move on the left-hand side. They come into about 200 meters to go. It's still a very large group. There's not time for any other attacks, and they've all spent their biscuits trying to bring back Longa-Borghini and Paladin, who I thought were going to be caught at 3Ks because Paladin was cooked. Marianne Vos comes up the right-hand side, opens up her sprint. She's got Lotte Kopecky in the Belgian national champs jersey right on her wheel in the draft. Vos opens up early, and no one can even come near her. And yeah, Kopecky didn't even come past her back wheel. Incredible sprint from Marianne Vos on the right-hand side of the barriers as she looks at it, beating Kopecky. Third, Lisa Brennau, the German, who in the German national champs jersey. Fourth, Balsamo. Fifth, Bastianelli. Sixth, Amelia Farlin for FDJ. Seventh, Kristen Faulkner. Eighth, Sarah Roy. And ninth, Emma Nosgard. And who came 10th? Lauren Stevens for Team Tibco, Silicon Valley Banks. They got 2 in the top 10. Team Tibco, not too bad for them at all, but a double today for Jumbo Visma. Pretty impressive from them, and Voss dialing back the clock. I mean, I'm trying to think of what other teams could have done differently, but really, Benji.
I think Trek could have done something differently.
Okay.
Like,
when?
the situation when the echelons happened, when they made the echelon themselves, I think they should have done things differently there. So, like, to give context to what I'm about to explain, let's talk about echelons. How are echelons made? It's by riders at the front, making sure that the crosswinds affect the riders behind them by moving in line to one side of the road. This time it was the left side of the road, where they were making sure that everybody was on the side so that everybody had to put in their max effort to stay on the wheel of the rider in front of them. If there's a gap, it's going to be really, really tough to stay on the wheel of the rider before you. That's how the gaps are created in echelons. Once there's a gap of like 20 to 30 meters, you got to change the tactic in the echelon, because then you need to start riding diagonally, because then you're helping the people behind you. And if you keep doing that, riding diagonally, then you're going to have much more with the energy to keep going with the echelon, because the riders that are in your wheel are not having as much trouble following your wheel. And that is how echelons are held after they are made. And in this situation, Trek Segafredo women, they made the echelon perfectly. They went to the side. And even the Belgian commentator mentioned it while we were watching, that they kept it on the side. And that was an issue, because then it's harder for the people following, and it keeps putting people in trouble. While it would have been much better for that 6 to 7 women group to ride diagonally to keep the echelon going, and then you would have had a bit of a track battle against the people behind you. And I think that's how that situation would have gone differently. And because of this issue is also one of the reasons I think that Longa-Borghini got away in the first place. Because she got away, I don't think it was totally on purpose, that attack. I think the second rider just lost her wheel. And I think this is why. I think they fucked up the echelon a tiny bit.
And was it even optimal? I know it's a good move, but if you've created a split, which they had, and you've got 4 riders in the group, then why not just try and have a group where you can use that numerical advantage? And they were the strongest team. Instead, they've created a situation where, yes, they got Longa-Borghini up the road, but it's a massive group behind that hadn't really done too much up to the Kemmelberg. Big effort there, but then they've recovered for maybe 10Ks plus. So it's just less likely. It's not like it's not Trofeo Alfredo Binder where it was a smaller group. that was trying to chase down Elisa Longa Borghini without multiple teammates. And I think Trek probably would have been better off having a group of 8, 9 with 3 or 4 of their riders in there, then develop an advantage over the group behind, then roll attacks with Van Dijk first, then Elisa Longa Borghini. Canyon Schramm, Soraya Paladin on the move, great. She followed it. Maybe she could have sat on more, but I don't think she was ever beating Elisa Longa Borghini either. And it kind of played out well for them. They got a lead out for Kopecky right on Mariana Voss, and Voss was just too good. And that's just the way it is sometimes. Voss is boss, and she didn't really need a lead out. She was her own lead out, taking out Ken Wevelgem, and let me look up her 232nd pro road win, I think, according to PCS. So pretty solid, to be honest. And then we'll have Dwals Tour of London women, I think, on Wednesday. I don't have the video rights for that, unfortunately. But is it a World Tour race, Benji? Women's World Tour race? Dwals Tour of London? Anyway, if it's on,
I don't
we'll
know,
cover
but
it.
we should cover it either way.
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
cover it anyway. So it doesn't really matter. We break the rules here all the time. But thanks if you've been listening on the podcast, players, for listening through the race triple header on this Sunday. Pretty late right now, but pretty good day of racing. I wouldn't say it was as banging as E3 Harel Becker, but anyway, maybe there's like a course discussion that's going to be held in the Belgian media that we will never hear about. But thanks for listening. This was the women's Ken Fabelham recap. And if you're listening on YouTube, there's the other 2 videos for the men's Ken Fabelham and Catalonia Stage 7. Thanks as always, and we'll see you